Free will is a lie, and science just proved it. Your finger was moving before you decided. Not a metaphor, milliseconds where motor circuits ramped while your inner narrator slept. Now make it personal. The last time you swore, "I chose that," your brain had already started the move and let you take the credit. And here's the twist that should crawl under your skin. In some studies, patterns in frontoparietal cortex hint at your choice up to 7 seconds before you report deciding. That means the machine inside you can lean toward an action before you ever feel the urge, and you only find out when the story arrives. Meanwhile, physics denies a universal now, and quantum experiments make outcomes look context-dependent, as if reality commits late. So no, you didn't really choose to click this. The choice assembled upstream. You felt the afterglow and called it will. If that's true, your rules for praise and blame, your idea of responsibility, even your definition of you, need a rewrite. This isn't a thought experiment. It's about your next promise, your next mistake, your next apology. Stay because the strongest evidence was downplayed, reframed, and misunderstood for decades. And once you see it, you won't look at any of your choices the same way again. The illusion of choice, Libet's clock. Get this, the modern free will fight didn't start in a philosophy hall. It started with a dot circling a clock and a tiny flick of the wrist. Understand why? We need to go back to Benjamin Libet in the early 198s. In 1983 at UCSF, volunteers sat with EEG electrodes, eyes on a fast rotating spot. Their job was simple: at a moment of their choosing, flex a finger, then report as honestly as possible where the dot was when they first felt the urge, the W moment, the birth of intention. Meanwhile, the EEG watched for a slow, rising wave over motor areas, the readiness potential. Here are the stakes. If intention shows up before the brain ramps up, consciousness calls the shots. If the ramp begins earlier, consciousness looks late to its own party. Libet's result landed hard. The neural wave, the Berechauf's potential, reliably began before reported intention. A clear way to see the sequence is this. The readiness potential starts roughly 350 milliseconds before the felt intention. The felt intention appears about 200 milliseconds before the actual movement. Some reports cite an approximate 635 millisecond lead relative to movement. That larger figure reflects broader onset estimates across trials and methods, not the lag between intention and action. By Libet's reading, initiation happens unconsciously. Awareness narrates after. Why this matters, it shifts "I decided" into "I noticed deciding." Agency moves from origin to commentary. The consequences spill out: ethics, law, motivation. Because if will is after the fact, what are we praising or blaming? What actually happened in those sessions wasn't dramatic. No shocks, no sudden gasps, just the quiet creep of voltage and a subjective timestamp. But the human reaction in the lab was unforgettable. People swore they were deciding in real time. They weren't lying. They were experiencing the system's story. That's the sting. The brain can prepare action while the storyteller, your conscious self, arrives late and confident. Libet tried to keep a door open. He floated a veto. Maybe consciousness can stop an already initiated act in the final 100-200 milliseconds. Free won't, not free will. You can feel why this matters. If the orchestra starts without the conductor, maybe the conductor can still raise a hand and halt the piece. It's a comforting image, but it's also a late gate, not authorship. Meanwhile, something else was happening in the following decades. The readiness potential, once treated as a smoking gun, became a battleground. Critics pointed out the task is trivial: no stakes, no outcomes, just arbitrary twitches. In real life, decisions involve costs and goals, not coin flips. Others question the clock method. Shifting attention from an inner urge to a moving dot may distort the timing you report. There's latency in noticing and latency in remembering that noticing. How clean can that be? Even so, the core pattern, brain activity preceding the reported intention, kept showing up. Meta-analyses and replications varied on exact timings and interpretations, but the direction held. Neural buildup first, conscious intention later. The interpretation evolved. The sequence survived a lot of poking. Here's where it gets interesting. Averaging EEG across many trials can conjure tidy waves from noisy data. Some argued the readiness potential might partly reflect averaging variable build-ups aligned to movement. Single trial analyses added nuance. Sometimes the lead-up looks like random drift crossing a threshold rather than a pristine go command. That reframes the story. Perhaps spontaneous fluctuations bias timing, and what we call intention is our best guess at when drift became decisive. A human moment. A graduate student in a replication is told, "Move whenever you feel like it." She stares at the clock, waits, and moves. Later, reviewing her data, she sees the slow rise begin long before she remembers wanting to move. That night she lies awake, wondering if anything she wants is truly hers. The next morning she schedules a run, preps meals, and blocks social apps for 4 hours. She's not free in the old sense. She's engineering her constraints. But there was one problem worth respecting: small samples in the original work. Libet's classic paper analyzed data from just a handful of participants. Big claims on thin ice? Maybe. Yet subsequent studies with larger cohorts still found early neural predictors of action timing, even while disputing what exactly the readiness potential represents. Impact sharp. If intention lags, then I is a model that explains behavior after control processes have done the heavy lifting. The self shifts from monarch to narrator, from commander to curator. That lands hard. Yet it also clarifies a path. If narrations can't author actions, maybe they can still modulate them by shaping context and training gates. Critics kept pressing. These are trivial choices, they said. Fair point. In real decisions, valuation and memory weigh in. But note what nobody has found in Libet-style paradigms: a reliable signal that conscious intention precedes and causes neural initiation. The leads go the other way. This was the moment everything changed. Not a proof that free will is impossible, but a pivot in how we talk about control. The brain doesn't wait for the story. The story tries to keep up. While that was happening in the lab, machines learned to peek further upstream, training algorithms to read weak biases seconds before you feel a pull. And that's where the ground really starts to shift. 7 seconds ahead, brain as spoiler. While that was happening in Libet's room, something unnerving showed up in scanners. Your brain whispering its leaning seconds before you feel a pull. Here are the stakes. If a machine can read your upcoming choice before you arrive, authorship shrinks. Not fate written in ink, but probabilities stacked like loaded dice, drifting you toward a button you'll later call mine. Action first. In the late 200s, John Dylan Haynes' group, Chun Seong Soon and colleagues, put volunteers in an fMRI. Same simple game. Choose left or right whenever you feel the urge, then report when you first sense deciding. But instead of single EEG channels, they used multivariate pattern analysis, training classifiers to spot subtle, distributed activity in prefrontal and parietal cortex that correlated with later button presses. The result landed quietly and shook loudly, above chance prediction up to 7 seconds before the reported intention. Not certainty, roughly 55 to 60% accuracy, but far from coin flip noise. Signals clustered in frontopolar cortex, pre-SMA, and parietal regions, areas linked to context, timing, and goal maintenance rather than muscle commands. Stakes concrete. 7 seconds is ages in neural terms, hundreds of recurrent cycles, time for loops to reinforce a bias until a threshold pops. If those loops shape the space of possible acts, will starts to look like a surface ripple over a deeper current. You still feel the crest, the current set it up. A human moment. A subject steps out of the scanner. It felt random until it didn't. Then I knew. But you're saying the machine knew first, the researcher shrugs. It read the setup. He laughs, then doesn't. Being read before you speak lingers. What nobody knew during each trial, what you can't know from the inside, was how slow cortical fluctuations tilt the table. The brain's decision variables often follow accumulation-to-bound dynamics. Tiny nudges integrate until a criterion is met. Spontaneous low-frequency drift makes some moments closer to go than others. From the inside, that drift feels like freedom. From the outside, it looks like a coin with biased air. But there was one problem worth respecting. These tasks are constrained. Buttons, not careers. Seconds, not years. Critics said, "You can't tell me 57% equals destiny." True. No honest scientist claimed destiny. The claim is narrower and sharper. Predictive information about upcoming choices exists in distributed cortex seconds before awareness reports the intention. That moves the timestamp on authorship. Action continued. The spoiler wasn't the primary motor strip revving a finger. It was the route planner softly steering toward an exit. Meanwhile, EEG and MEG studies joined in, decoding prefrontal signatures before reported intention on single trials, while motor buildup rose closer to movement. Across modalities, the rhyme stayed. Weak priors upstream, awareness downstream. Complications deserve clarity. Classifiers can overfit. Motion can masquerade as mind. Cross-validation must be ruthless. Teams tightened protocols, independent test sets, careful artifact control, and still pulled early signal. Effect sizes stayed modest because minds aren't single wires, but modest isn't meaningless. In a high-dimensional system, small biases integrated repeatedly become actions. A micro-story. A marketer A/B tests 2 thumbnails. She doesn't know your sleep debt, the playlist you left on, the last argument you had. Her model learned proxies, time of night, watch history, device habits. You see the tile. You feel a tug. A second later, you decide. Platforms don't read souls, they read setups. Meanwhile, value-based decisions scale the pattern. In tasks with actual stakes, ventromedial prefrontal cortex carries valuation signals that drift before commitment. Classifiers can read leanings early, and drift diffusion fits still hold. The richer the choice, the more sources feed the accumulator, memory, emotion, cost, but the threshold story survives. Conscious intention is the felt moment the integrator tips, not the author of the tipping. Here's where it gets interesting for agency. If prefrontal ensembles carry weak priors that crystallize into choices, managing priors becomes the lever. Sleep, stress, training, and context shift baseline drift. You can't conjure an uncaused act, but you can move the distribution your next act will be sampled from. But there was one more complication. Averaging can create illusions. In Libet-style work, some argued the readiness potential partly reflects aligning noisy trajectories to movement. Single trial decoding answered with nuance. Variability is the engine, not the enemy. Endogenous fluctuations aren't junk, they're the substrate of timing. Prediction reads that substrate. Impact sharp. The brain is a spoiler for its own plot. Machines don't mind-read final choices. They read constraints and tendencies early enough that awareness looks late. That's not a death sentence for responsibility. It's a map. If the spoiler lives in priors, then practice, framing, and environments are authorship as engineering. A human moment. You promise to skip late-night scrolling. The promise fails. You set the router to sleep at 11. Tomorrow, the same urge rises, hits a dark modem, and fades. You'll say, "I chose to sleep." True enough. Truer, you edited the spoiler. Everything is about to shift again when we ask whether physics even gives us a clean now for the self to operate in. Because if time itself doesn't line up the way your story expects, choosing may be less a shove and more an address you were always going to pass. Time doesn't wait, it bends. Relativity's trap. While classifiers were whispering seconds ahead, physics was cutting the ground under the very moment you think you decide on. Here are the stakes. If there's no single, universal now, then there's no cosmic stage where a sovereign self steps in to push an open future. Your present becomes a local slice, angled differently for every mover, and choice starts to look like a coordinate on a path rather than a hand on a lever. Action first. Einstein's special relativity wrecked absolute simultaneity. Two observers moving relative to each other won't agree on which distant events are at the same time. That's not an illusion, it's geometry. Draw a light cone around your decision. Everything inside the past cone can affect it. Everything inside the future cone can be affected by it. Everything outside is elsewhere, with no absolute before or after. Without a privileged present, there's no master clock for intentions to beat or miss. A human moment. You're on a train texting a friend across town. I'm deciding whether to call. In your frame, the thought precedes the call. In another frame, someone racing past your window. Those events can swap order as long as they're outside each other's light cones. No paradox, just different slices through space-time. Your intuition about a global sequence was grown on slow hills and quiet speeds. Relativity calls it parochial. Meanwhile, general relativity bends time itself. Gravity dilates clocks. Higher up a mountain, time ticks faster than at sea level. GPS satellites run ahead unless engineers correct them. Your brain is a network of clocks, oscillations, delays, conduction speeds. There's no cosmic metronome they can appeal to. The equations of relativity describe world lines, continuous paths through space-time. The flow you feel isn't in the math. It's the inside view of moving along one path. But there was one problem for the folk model of will. We picture a crisp present slicing a pliable future with the self pressing new branches into existence. In a block universe description, past, present, and future are all laid out, different addresses on a four-dimensional map. Your childhood, this sentence, tomorrow's apology. They're coordinates, not conjurings. From the outside, if such a view existed, there's no becoming, only being. From the inside, the experience of becoming persists because memory is asymmetric. You store yesterday's states, not tomorrow's. Stakes concrete. If order outside light cone relations is frame dependent, then the debate about whether a readiness potential leads intention by 400 or 600 milliseconds is layered on a physics that won't bless a universal first. Inside your local cone, causality holds tight. Outside, simultaneity tilts with motion. You don't gain freedom by losing a global clock. You lose the one scoreboard that would let you claim the present as a special lane where a ghost could merge. Action continued. The block picture isn't an airy metaphor. It earns predictions. Muons created high in the atmosphere reach the ground because their internal clocks are slowed by speed. Twin paradox setups match clock readings after fast loops. Particle accelerators require relativistic timing to hit targets. Everywhere we look, time acts like a woven dimension with elastic threads, not a river that carries events. What nobody knew when our brains evolved was how thoroughly the now fractures at high speeds and in deep gravity. We stitched identity across breakfasts and bedtimes, then mistook that stitching for a cosmic present. Relativity tells you straight. The stitching is local and useful. It's not a throne for agency. A human micro-story. A cardiologist stands in a cath lab glancing at a wall clock while a nurse checks a wristwatch. Both keep time. Neither keeps the time. Their devices drift differently in altitude and acceleration, and the hospital's network reconciles them. You make a decision in that room. The timestamps that frame it are conventions nailed onto a curved stage. Complications deserve honesty. Some physicists resist hard block talk, leaning on quantum indeterminacy or process philosophies that try to keep becoming alive. But relativity's equations don't need a flowing time. They hum without it. The arrow we feel in daily life leans on thermodynamics. Entropy rises, records accumulate, eggs scramble. That arrow explains why memories point backward and plans point forward. It doesn't create a privileged present for a will to enter. Here's where it gets interesting for responsibility. If choices are coordinates where neural states cross thresholds along a world line, then agency becomes the geometry of that line, the regularities in how constraints, priors, and environments bend it. You don't step off the map to author a new point. You shape earlier sections of the path, sleep, training, community, so that when you reach the decision coordinate, the crossing happens in a better direction. But there was one worry people raise fast. If the future already exists in the block, what's the point of trying? The point is local causation. Your trying is a segment of the path that lies in the past light cone of outcomes you care about. It's part of the machinery that makes those outcomes true. Calling the map fixed doesn't remove the roads, it names them. Impact sharp. Relativity collapses the fantasy of a universal now, where a sovereign self can break the chain. It replaces it with light cones, geometry, and clocks that depend on motion and mass. Inside that frame, what looks less like command and more like constraint management across time. You tune the conditions earlier so the later point lands where you'd endorse it. Meanwhile, the quantum story complicates intuition in a different way. If relativity flattens now, delayed choice experiments flatten what happened, until a measurement context forces a consistent account. Put those together, and the stage for sovereign will get smaller, not larger. Next, we'll walk into the lab where future settings seem to decide which story the past can bear, and we'll keep causality honest while we do it. The quantum loophole, delayed choice. While relativity took away a universal now, quantum mechanics messed with what happened in the first place. Here are the stakes. If later measurement settings determine which earlier description makes sense, wave or particle, then your tidy line from cause to effect feels unstable. Not broken, but contextual. The story you can consistently tell depends on questions asked after the fact. Action first. John Wheeler sketched the core move in the 197s. Take a single photon double slit or a Mach Zander interferometer. If paths remain coherent and untagged, the counts show interference, wave-like. If you mark which path, coherence collapses and the pattern goes particle-like. Wheeler's twist. Choose the apparatus setting late, after the photon has already passed the place where, naively, it should have decided what it was. In Mach Zander form, you insert or remove the second beam splitter at the last moment. Insert it, and interference emerges at one output. Remove it, and detection split as if the photon took one arm. The kicker is timing. Adjust late, and the outcomes still match the late setting. A human moment. You sit at the control panel, the interferometer hums, the photon departs the first splitter. At the final instant, you press insert. The detector that would have clicked if the splitter weren't there stays quiet, the other goes bright. Someone says, "So did your choice change what it did back there?" Your stomach flips. Enter the quantum eraser. In 1999, Yoon-Ho Kim, R.U. S.P. Kulik, Y.H. Shi, and Marlon Scully built a delayed choice eraser with entangled photon pairs. One photon, the signal, heads to a screen. Its partner, the idler, wanders through a maze that either preserves which path information or erases it by recombining paths. The signal's raw hits alone show no fringes. But if you later sort the signal hits into subsets conditioned on the idler's outcomes, the erased subset displays interference. The which path kept subset does not. Crucial detail. The idler's measurement, and your choice of erasing or not, can occur after the signal has already struck the screen. What nobody sees in the raw data is a retro message. You can't stand at the screen and watch interference turning on or off in real time based on a future switch. The total distribution stays fringe-free. Only when you correlate with the idler record, the delayed choice, do the wave-like and particle-like subpatterns emerge. No faster-than-light signal, no paradox, just correlations that force a consistent accounting. But there was one problem for common sense. We want the photon to have really done one thing, either gone both ways and interfered, or picked a path and didn't. The experiments say the question is ill-posed without specifying the full measurement context. Keep which path information available and particle language fits. Erase it, and wave language fits. The theory, unitary evolution plus measurement, returns probabilities that line up with either narrative once you condition on the idler's outcome. It does not license both at once. Stakes concrete. This looks like minimal commit. The universe doesn't store an ever-expanding ledger of microscopic facts. It evolves amplitudes that encode possibilities, and when a measurement context locks in, it returns outcomes consistent with that context everywhere relevant. That's thrift. Don't render details no one will ever query. Ensure that any future query yields a story that knits with the rest. Action continued. In Wheeler's delayed choice versions with starlight bent by a galaxy, the choice of looking for interference versus which path can be made billions of years after a mission by how we set our telescopes on Earth. Again, there's no retrocausality, no change to the past. There is a late commitment to a consistent account of earlier propagation. In lab interferometers, fast modulators switch beam splitters in nanoseconds. In erasers, long optical delays make the idler's fate decide your later sort. Across setups, one rule holds. You can't use any of this to signal backwards. You can use it to learn what kind of questions reality will answer. A human micro-story. A grad student stares at the histogram pairs. Unsliced totals, smooth hump. Condition on idler erase, fringes. Condition on idler keep, anti-fringes. She whispers, "So what was it doing?" Her advisor says, "Calculating amplitudes." It's drier than the mystery deserved and still correct. Complications deserve honesty. Interpretations differ. Many world says nothing collapses. Branches keep both tails and your conditioning picks your branches consistent book. Copenhagen-esque takes keep collapse and contextuality. Relational and cubist views relocate facts to interactions or agents. The experiments don't arbitrate metaphysics, they constrain stories. Any story must recover no signaling, contextual outcomes, and the conditional reappearance of fringes. Impact sharp. Delayed choice and eraser results don't hand minds a cosmic brush. They say descriptions are query-bound. That dovetails with our rendering lens. Compute amplitudes broadly, commit outcomes only when a measurement context enforces consistency, and never waste bandwidth on details that no interaction will ever expose. Meanwhile, tie this back to agency. If the world's answers depend on how you ask, then choice looks like selecting measurement contexts, externally with instruments, internally with attention and goals. You don't rewrite yesterday. You pick which consistent slice of possibility becomes your tomorrow's record. That isn't sorcery. It's constraint choreography. The Objections, freedom's last stand. Before we torch a centuries-old idea, we owe it the strongest defense. Here are the stakes. If we overread lab quirks or lean on metaphors, we'll swap one myth for another. So let freedom's best lawyers speak, and let's keep the facts tight. First objection, indeterminism. Quantum randomness breaks the chains. Maybe some neural events are genuinely stochastic, maybe that's the wiggle room, but randomness isn't agency. A Geiger counter's click doesn't decide. Sprinkle noise into a policy and you get variability, not authorship. In brains, exploration helps learning, temperature raised to escape ruts, but it's still part of a strategy tuned by neuromodulators. When noise helps, it's because the system decided to use it, then constrained it. That's not a soul stepping in. That's an algorithm widening search. Second objection, Libet's veto, free won't. Maybe initiation bubbles up unconsciously, but consciousness can still cancel in the last 100-200 milliseconds. Useful? Yes. Magical? No. The neuroanatomy is sober. Anterior cingulate flags conflict and cost. Pre-SMA stalls, basal ganglia gates. Right inferior frontal cortex fires to stop. Practice improves this gate. Fatigue and stress degrade it. It's impressive inhibitory control, not uncaused causation. The veto is a brake you can train, not a ghostly override. Third objection, trivial tasks. Finger twitches and left-right taps don't generalize to careers or love. Fair. But scale up and the rhyme holds. In value-based choices, ventromedial prefrontal cortex carries valuation signals that drift before commitment. Drift diffusion models fit. Classifiers decode leanings early at modest accuracies. Stakes add layers, memory, affect, social inference. But the controller looks like a bigger version of the same engine. Trivial doesn't prove totality. It shows direction, predictive information upstream, awareness downstream. Fourth objection, phenomenology. It feels like I'm deciding. Experience is data. It is, and the interpreter is a known confabulator. Split brain patients invent reasons for actions triggered by stimuli one hemisphere never saw. Healthy people justify swap choices they didn't make. The feeling matters as a report of how it seems inside the workspace when contents integrate. It isn't proof of authorship in a system that often narrates after. A human moment. A defense attorney says, "My client chose." A neuroscientist on the stand says, "He acted." Both sentences can be true in different languages. The courtroom needs a bridge, not a winner. Fifth objection, prediction isn't destiny. 57% accuracy 7 seconds out isn't mind control, correct. No honest lab claims certainty. The claim is tighter. Weak biases in frontopolar, pre-SMA, and parietal patterns are readable seconds before reported intention. That moves the timestamp on authorship. In a recurrent system, small biases integrated across cycles become acts. Probabilistic drift doesn't excuse, it explains. Sixth objection, compatibilism. Freedom is acting from your reasons without coercion, even if reasons have causes. Under our map, that lands on solid ground. Your reasons are workspace contents, beliefs, values, plans that win the bid. Freedom becomes the reliability of the coupling between reasons and actions, plus the absence of threats and lies. By that standard, you can hold people responsible for acting from their reasons while focusing accountability on forward-looking tools. Deterrence that actually deters, rehabilitation that actually rewires, environments that reduce risk. But there was one problem for culture. People hear caused and think excused. Cause doesn't mean condoned. It means we pick levers that work. Change cues, adjust incentives, treat biology, train control, shift priors. Retribution fades. Accountability stays. Seventh objection. If we can intervene top-down, reappraise, meditate, visualize, then consciousness causes action. Top-down influence is real and mechanistic. Reappraisal increases prefrontal control and lowers amygdala response. Meditation alters default mode coupling and boosts interoceptive precision. Visualization changes motor cortex excitability. These effects arrive through circuits, not through a gap in physics. Powerful, trainable, not spooky. Eighth objection. Physics might leave room, future boundary conditions, time-symmetric causation. There are time-symmetric formalisms, two-state vector ideas, retro-style accounts that keep causality inside light cones while letting future measurements constrain consistent descriptions. None give a privileged slot to uncaused will. They revise bookkeeping. They don't install a throne. Micro story. A monk hears the whole case and smiles. So, train the causes. That sentence carries 2,000 years of compatibilism in older robes. If you can't step outside the river, shape the banks. What nobody has shown, despite decades of trying, is a regime where conscious intention reliably precedes neural initiation and drives action in a way that beats alternative mechanistic accounts. If you want libertarian freedom, the bar is clear. Specify timing, mechanism, boundary conditions, and show it under control. Until then, we live with the map we have. Impact sharp. Indeterminism adds texture, not authorship. Veto reframes as gating. Trivial task critiques widen context without flipping the arrow. Compatibilism salvages the pieces that make society work, reasons, consent, planning, without pretending to magic. Responsibility migrates from blame to engineering. Build systems that set better priors, reduce high-precision temptations, and reward long horizons. Meanwhile, one last itch stays. If will is interface and the world is thrift, what writes the rules the interface runs on? Blind law, universal computation, or engineered code? We'll open that hood next and keep speculation on a short leash. Code or cosmos, what's writing the script? We've walked the pipeline, neural drift, predictive brains, relativity's geometry, quantum's contextual bookkeeping. Now the itch under all of it. What writes the rules this stack obeys? Here are the stakes. If the author is blind law, meaning is engineered locally. If the author is computation all the way down, we're patterns in a universal process. If the author is an external coder, we're inside an economy of resources that isn't ours. Each lens changes how we act. First lens, blind laws. No writer, just equations and boundary conditions. Conservation laws fence motion. Symmetries decide what cannot vary, dynamics evolve states. The payoff is brutal elegance. Eclipses, muon lifetimes, GPS corrections, interference fringes. Predictions cash out without a backstage hand. Under this lens, why becomes because this compact model compresses data and keeps winning. Meaning isn't granted. Organisms manufacture it by building projects that survive error. A human moment. A physicist scribbles a line of math that forecasts a detector's click rate months ahead. When the plot lands, he doesn't feel small. He feels included, like the world allowed comprehension. But there was one problem for people who want more. Blind law is enough for accuracy and still silent about purpose. It tells you how to steer within rules, not what the steering is for. The fix isn't metaphysical add-ons. It's to accept that purpose is a control problem. Reduce long-horizon error for systems we value, knowing those values are cause too. Second lens, pancomputational nature. Reality as computation without a server, matter as information processing, dynamics as state transitions. The question becomes compressibility. If short programs reproduce data, we found law. If not, we're staring at high Kolmogorov of complexity or unmodeled structure. Cellular automata are the parable. Simple rules yield gliders, gardens, and chaos. Emergent structure appears without an author. The discipline here is quantitative. Don't say everything computes and stop. Ask how many bits, how short a description, how universal a class. A human moment. A coder writes a 5-line rule and watches a menagerie crawl out of the grid. He laughs. Then he measures, because marvel without metrics is story, not science. Third lens, engineered simulation. Maybe there is a programmer. The tease comes from physics that looks like resource management. Area law entanglement, holographic bounds, quantum error-correcting code structures in toy gravity, minimal commit outcomes in measurement. Those rhymes make designers nod. But maybe isn't a receipt. Unfalsifiable moves. the sim hides its tracks, aren't a theory. If you reach for this lens, you owe predictions. Finite precision glitches at specific scales, global optimization signatures that real physics can't mimic, algorithmic randomness limits that bite where rendering would hurt. What nobody knew a century ago is how far information has invaded core physics. Thermodynamics retells itself as information theory, Landor prices erasure, black hole entropy scales with area, tensor networks reconstruct bulk geometry like parity checks heal data. You don't need a server to see a stack. You need to accept that stuff behaves like protected information under constraints. Stakes concrete. Each lens yields different bets. Blind law says, hunt invariants and symmetries, build models with fewer bits, expect continuity where the data haven't broken it. Pancomputing says, favor compressive explanations, look for universality classes, expect the same emergent behavior across substrates that share constraints. Simulation says, design stress tests for thrift, device-independent randomness checks, cosmic source entropy audits, complexity scaling that tracks boundary channels, not naive bulk, and cross-correlations that look like global budgeting without violating no signaling. A human micro-story. A judge stares at a case file, tumor history, chaotic childhood, sleep debt, stimulant relapse. She doesn't invoke souls. She invokes levers, medication, housing first, small certain incentives, tight schedules, reliable rides. 6 months later, clean tests and a part-time job. In blind law, that's exploiting dynamics. In pancomputing, that's rewriting priors with data. In simulation, it's still the only way anything moved. But there was one problem worth underlining. Meaning slides if you misread the lens. Simulation talk can collapse into fatalism. Pancomputing can dissolve into mushy, everything is code. Blind law can feel cold. The correction is the same in all three. Value is relational. It lives in projects that stabilize low-error futures for beings we care about. It cashes out in feedback, lives less chaotic, skills compounding, trust thickening. Action clean, live multi-platform. Build as if blind law reigns. Error bars, replication, randomized trials, incentives aligned to measured outcomes. Learn as if pancomputing holds. Teach model building, compressive thinking, and experiment design. Expose students to rich training distributions rather than dopamine farms. Speculate as if simulation might be true but demand receipts. If thrift is real, find its signatures where physics can't fake them. A human moment. A game developer watches a talk on holography, smiles at the elegance, then frowns. Just because I love this trick doesn't mean anyone used it. That's the discipline. Don't confuse a seductive metaphor for evidence. Use it to form questions that nature can answer. Impact sharp. We don't need a final author to act with purpose. We need models that predict and levers that move. Keep your beliefs light and your interventions heavy. When a lens helps you design the next test or the next policy, keep it. When it drifts into poetry, set it down. Either way, you're still inside the stack, steering causes that will outlive you. Hacking the determined brain. If the pipeline is stacked, priors upstream, thresholds downstream, the move isn't to conjure freedom. It's to rewire the setup so the next inevitable act tips in your favor. Agency becomes engineering. Authorship becomes architecture. Start with metacognition. When you notice urges as signals, not orders, you buy milliseconds where inhibition can win. That isn't mysticism, it's precision control. Labeling an urge drops its expected reliability just enough for a competing plan to take the wheel. Mindfulness training boosts interoceptive accuracy, quiets noisy default chatter, and strengthens frontoparietal control. Translate that. Fewer stale predictions in the workspace, cleaner gating when costs spike, and a wider gap between signal and action. A human moment. A surgeon scrubs in, adrenaline rising. She names the flutter, lengthens exhale, and feels palms loosen. The naming isn't poetry. It's a parameter update that lowers precision on panic now and raises it on steady hands. Minutes later, the move that would have trembled lands clean. What nobody wants to hear, because it sounds boring, is that sleep, movement, light, and food are cognitive controls firmware. Sleep loss steepens delay discounting and amplifies amygdala reactivity. Deep sleep consolidates priors worth keeping and clears noise. Exercise raises catecholamine signal-to-noise, grows hippocampal volume, and improves mood regulation. Morning light anchors circadian clocks. Stable clocks gate attention and motivation. Stable glucose tames short-horizon spikes. If you want the brake to work, keep the hydraulic fluid topped. But there was one problem with relying on will to install those basics. Will shows up late. Design wins. Put your phone to sleep in another room so the queue never renders at midnight. Grayscale the screen and bury apps 3 taps deep so the loop loses easy precision. Pre-chop food and schedule workouts so transitions cost less than avoidance. A router timer at 11 beats a promise at 10:59 because the integrator never gets to evaluate the scroll. Stakes concrete. You can't pick an uncaused act, but you can change the distribution your next act will be sampled from. That's the lever. Alter priors, shift precision, pre-build friction, and pave routes you want. The feeling of I chose won't vanish. It'll finally track the structures you installed. Action type. Use a 3-layer scaffold, state, structure, skill. State, sleep anchors, sunlight within an hour of waking, protein-forward meals, daily movement. These stabilize precision and patience. Structure, time-box deep work blocks, 45-60 minutes. Dedicated start rituals, single-task rules, and inertial breaks. Stand, stretch, water between blocks. These lower switching error. Skill, urge labeling, cognitive reappraisal, and episodic future thinking. Labeling decouples cue from act. Reappraisal reframes immediate cost. Future thinking makes later vivid enough to matter now. A micro-protocol you can test in a week. Day 1 baseline. Track sleep window, steps, screen hours, and 3 urges you usually obey. No changes, just measure. Day 2 light and lock. 10 minutes of morning light, phone sleeps outside bedroom, router cutoff at 11. Day 3 2 deep blocks. Schedule 2 50-minute sessions. Start with 60 seconds. Breathe, name 3 urges, thank them, return. Browser closed, 1 playlist on loop. Day 4 friction and fuel. Move distracting apps into a buried folder. Prep tomorrow's lunch tonight. Front-load protein to flatten cravings. Day 5 micro wins. Pick 1 stubborn avoidance. Make the first step comically small, open the dock, lace shoes, fetch forms, then stop. Bank identity wins. Day 6, exposure and reappraisal. 5-minute exposure to a mild anxiety with a rehearsed reframe and a recovery ritual. Log prediction versus outcome. Day 7, review and lock. Choose 2 changes to keep for 30 days. Write 1-sentence rules and post them where the cues live. A human story. You used to doom scroll in bed. After the lock, your thumb floats over an empty home screen, finds nothing, and falls. 2 weeks in, you stop missing the feed and start waking clear. You'll say, I decided to sleep earlier. True enough. Truer. A timer, a lamp, a book on the pillow, and a brain that learned the new hill pays. Meanwhile, top-down tools aren't magic. They're mechanistic. Cognitive reappraisal increases lateral prefrontal control and lowers amygdala response. Implementation intentions. If X, then Y. Preload policies so the gate fires faster. Episodic future thinking recruits hippocampus to make delayed rewards concrete, flattening discount curves. Combine them with contingency management. Small, certain rewards for on-time starts, clean screens, or completed sessions. And behavior moves because the curve finally sees something worth waiting for. But there was one problem we can't dodge: exploration. You need it to learn. When stuck in ruts, raise temperature deliberately. New route to work, new desk at noon, unfamiliar gym, unsiloed reading. When scattered, lower it. Fixed playlist, fixed chair, fixed start ritual. Treat yourself like a bandit algorithm. Pull uncertain arms on purpose. then lock winners for a season. Stakes societal. If agency is engineering, institutions should supply scaffolds by default. Predictable schedules, bright-line rules, cues that push good loops and friction on harm. Courts with text reminders cut failures to appear. Classrooms with fixed start rituals raise engagement. Workplaces with focus blocks and quiet lights reduce switching fatigue. We don't need sermons, we need fixtures. Impact sharp. Hacking the determined brain isn't a loophole out of causation. It's causation used well. You set conditions, the system learns, thresholds tip differently, and tomorrow's inevitable act becomes one you'll endorse. You're not the monarch, you're the builder. Justice without free will. While you are rewiring your own levers, society has to answer a harder question. What do we do with harm if nobody chooses from nowhere? Here are the stakes. If retribution collapses, we don't shrug. We redesign justice to prevent harm, repair damage, and train better policies in people and places. Action first. Model-based justice starts with risk reduction, not prophecy, risk management. Shift attention from fixed traits to dynamic factors you can move. Sleep chaos, substance access, peer networks, housing instability, job structure, impulse control, and clocks. Replace bad person with high-risk system in a bad environment. Then build scaffolds that actually change priors. Cognitive behavioral training to spot runaway thoughts. Contingency management that pays small, certain rewards for clean screens and on-time check-ins. Vocational pipelines that turn idle hours into predictable income. Housing first to stabilize clocks before demanding reform. Where those pieces come together, recidivism falls, not because souls brighten, but because thresholds moved. A human moment. A judge in a drug court studies a file that reads like weather. Adolescent trauma, sleep debt, stimulants, friends who deal. Instead of 18 months inside, the sentence is scaffolding. Medication-assisted treatment, weekly CBT, random but scheduled tests, bus vouchers, evening group, a food card, and a case manager who picks up. 6 months later, clean screens, part-time work. The judge isn't lenient, she's precise. What nobody likes to admit is that punishment alone trains the wrong thing. Pure retribution teaches avoidance, secrecy, and short-horizon fear. Under stress, delay discounting steepens. Now gets louder, tomorrow fades. Deterrence only works when detection is swift, consequences are certain, and exits exist. Most systems miss the first two and erase the third. Model-based justice flips it. Small, immediate, predictable consequences for violations paired with big, immediate, predictable rewards for pro-social steps. Behavior moves where precision points. But there was one problem we have to face: moral hazard. If we make everything therapeutic, do we invite abuse? The fix isn't to bring vengeance back, it's to keep signaling clear. Separate worth from response. Maintain firm boundaries, violate conditions, lose privileges, repair and regain. Publicly reinforce norms, speeding still costs money. Assault still triggers separation. The aim changes, not payback, but fewer future victims. Stakes concrete. Restorative practices put victims in the design, not to overwrite anger, but to channel it. In a careful conference, the person who caused harm hears specific impact, names the behavior, and offers concrete repair, money, labor, apology, training. Victims report higher closure. People who offended reoffend less when the plan includes real structure. The point isn't absolution, it's alignment. Everyone sees the same model of cause and remedy. A micro story. A teenager tags a local shop. Old path, fine, probation, nothing learned. New path, Saturdays repainting the walls, sweeping floors, listening to the owner talk payroll and thin margins. A month later, the teen asks for shifts. The owner says yes with rules. Call it soft if you want. The neighborhood calls it quieter. Action continued. Environmental design beats lectures. Broken windows, policing tried to engineer order with presence and low-level arrests. Evidence says it bloated paperwork and strained trust. Try this instead. Lights and sightlines on corners. Youth clubs open after dark. Transit that makes showing up easy. Court date text nudges. simplified forms, fewer fees that snowball into warrants. Where these roll out, failures to appear fall, violent crime nudges down, and police-victim contact gets less explosive. The machine runs smoother when friction is moved from people to problems. Meanwhile, calibrate incentives. Scale fines by income so penalties hit proportionally. Shrink probation caseload so officers coach, not just catch. Narrow conditions to 2 behaviors at a time. Overload guarantees failure. Give employers liability shields and tax credits to hire returning citizens. When prison is unavoidable, turn it into school and clinic with clocks, light, and predictable schedules, because you're writing tomorrow's policies inside those walls whether you intend to or not. But there was one case we promised to pay off. A young man's sudden impulsive offenses traced to a tumor pressing his orbitofrontal cortex. Surgeons remove it, behavior stops. Months later, symptoms return, scans show regrowth. Remove it again, impulses vanish. In court, the tumor doesn't erase harm, but it reframes response. Protect the public, repair damage, treat the cause, monitor closely. The judge's language shifts from monster to mechanism under disease. The system updates. A human moment. A victim sits across from the person who harmed her. The room is careful, advocate at her side, facilitator steady. She says what the broken window did to her sleep. He says how he'll pay, when he'll fix, what he'll join. He doesn't ask for forgiveness. She doesn't grant it. They draft a plan. Weeks later, the check clears, the window holds, her sleep returns. Closure isn't cosmic, it's a door that finally shuts. Complications deserve honesty. Some people remain dangerous. Incapacitation stays on the table, cleaner, faster, safer. But even then, the aim is future risk reduction, not pain for its own sake. Treatment where possible, skill building where plausible, humane conditions always. And rigor matters. Randomized pilots, clear metrics, stop rules for programs that don't move outcomes. Impact sharp. Responsibility migrates from metaphysics to engineering. Systems become accountable for the futures they create. Cities for light and transit, courts for clarity and speed, prisons for skill and clock, schools for executive function, public health for sleep and substance access. People remain answerable inside those systems, answerable in ways that change tomorrow. You don't need free will to build safer streets. You need better causes. Meaning after the myth. So if the ghost is gone, why get out of bed? Here are the stakes without sugar. If free will was a story the brain tells, the old pep talk, be the author of your life, rings hollow. But meaning never lived in that pep talk. It lives in feedback loops you can stabilize, in projects that keep paying forward, in relationships that lower long horizon error so plans can survive bad days. Strip the magic and purpose gets clearer, not smaller. Action first. Meaning behaves like an emergent property of well-tuned control. When your priors, values, and environment line up, effort flows, friction drops, and that on-path feeling shows up. You didn't choose those values from nowhere. They were installed by genes, family, culture, books, songs, mentors, 100 lunches. Still, when they cohere with what you do, your predictor runs cool. That felt click is meaning. You can't summon it by decree, but you can design for it. A human moment. It's 2 a.m., the baby needs a bottle. You step outside, cold air, quiet street, a washed-out moon. You feel a small steadiness. No cosmic permission arrived. Your nervous system fit the scene for a breath, and the scene fit you back. What nobody tells you is that nihilism is often a withdrawal symptom. When the authorship myth dissolves, emptiness can surge. If I didn't choose, none of this counts. Then the data creep in. Projects that return clean signals, show up, learn, help, start beating clicks and spikes. You realize meaning is less a metaphysical jewel and more a loop that stabilizes through setbacks. It's the sensation of prediction error dropping where it matters. But there was one problem worth naming. Meaning gets hijacked by status, followers, titles, money. Those are short horizon, high precision cues engineered to pop. They feel meaningful because they punch prediction error hard. Then they evaporate. Long horizon meaning is quieter. It looks like skill accrued over years, a kid who trusts you, a craft that keeps teaching, a friend who answers at midnight. The The signal is delayed, but it compounds. Under determinism, compounding is everything. Stakes concrete. If you didn't choose your starting priors, you can still choose as if to cultivate ones that pay longer. That means tolerating boredom while better policies bed in, choosing crews that reinforce patience, and making a habit of asking, what will my future self thank me for? It's not romance. It's training a predictor to wait delayed returns. Action practical. Build meaning like an engineer. Pick one problem bigger than you. Health literacy, clean water, open tools, public music, neighborhood light. The object matters less than the horizon. Tie practice to people. Teams stabilize effort by distributing error. Join or start a crew that meets weekly, badly at first, then better. Track lagging indicators. Hours coached, meals cooked, code merged, pages taught, calls returned. Not for bragging, for slope. The slope tells you the loop is alive. Mark starts and finishes. Openings and closings compress identity. I'm the kind of person who, and lower friction next time. Leave breadcrumbs for the future you. Notes, checklists, forgiving calendars. Meaning thrives when tomorrow's you isn't punished for today's human. A micro story. A tired teacher keeps a drawer of one-sentence notes from students. On rough days, she reads one. It's a legally tiny jolt from a long horizon project, a precision bump delivered on demand. She didn't conjure the warmth. She built a drawer that renders it when needed. Meanwhile, relationships do heavy lifting. Attachment isn't sentiment, it's a prediction contract. People who reliably show up reduce uncertainty. Lower uncertainty makes longer projects feasible. That's why dinner at the same table matters, why calendarized calls anchor weeks, why forgiving small slights protects years. Meaning rides on trust. Here, where it gets interesting for values you inherited. Some overfit the past, scripts for safety that now shrink life. Revising them isn't betrayal, it's model update. Books, therapy, mentors, travel. These aren't self-help trinkets. They widen the training distribution so your compressor stops mistaking a corner of the map for the world. A human moment. You finally call your sister about a stale hurt. You say the thing, she doesn't melt. A week later, she texts a dumb meme you loved as kids. Ice cracks. No metaphysical spark. Two predictive systems revised priors and reopened a path. If you want the old word, call it grace. It runs on cause and effect. Complications deserve honesty. Some days are bare. Illness erases bandwidth, grief explodes models, money stress flattens horizons. This isn't a sermon that bulldozes hardship. It's a reminder, meaning is fragile, but so is despair. Both are parameterized states. When you can't build, borrow, lean on someone else's scaffolding until yours holds again. Action tighter. A 4-step loop you can run this month. Scope, choose a weekly repeatable unit tied to a long project. 1 page, 1 rehearsal, 1 shift, 1 call. Slot, fix a day and time. Ritualize the start, same pen, same playlist, same seat. Signal, log completions in a visible place. Let the slope teach you. Social, share the log with one person who cares and ask for theirs. Reciprocity stabilizes. A human micro story. You volunteer at a Saturday clinic. The first week is awkward. By week 6, you know where the tape is, which drawer holds needles, how to greet the intake. You drive home tired and oddly awake. The graph in your notebook ticks up one more box. It's not transcendent, it's stable. Impact sharp. After the myth, meaning is craft. Align projects with durable values, bind them to people, ritualize the boring parts, measure slowly, forgive stumbles. You won't be free in the old sense. You'll be effective in the only sense that ever mattered. The world will carry traces of your time, and those traces will keep paying forward when you sleep. The final loop. Did you ever choose? Go back to the click that brought you here. You felt a tug, weighed the length, skimmed a comment, then tapped. Inside, it read as authorship. Upstream, valuation drift crossed threshold. Frontoparietal ensembles were already leaning. Platforms predict these moments from history and time of night. Labs decode leanings seconds early in simple tasks. That's not doom, it's timing. Here's the sting and the lever. Awareness is late, but it isn't powerless. When you learn urges are predictions, you install friction. When you learn patience collapses under sleep debt, you sleep first. When you learn your interpreter confabulates, you treat reasons as drafts. Meta-agency, steering causes that steer you, doesn't float above physics. It's physics turned inward. A human moment. Tomorrow, a headline pings the same curiosity circuit. You smile and let it pass because the router sleeps at 11 and your book owns the pillow. You'll say, I chose to read. True enough. Truer. You preloaded the state-tuned precision and shaped the question the brain would ask. Meanwhile, widen the lens. Relativity refused a universal now. Quantum erasers made descriptions depend on later queries. Information-first physics rewards thrift. Predictive brains render locally and learn by error. None of that gifts you a throne. All of it hands you handles. Measurement selection, attention placement, environmental design, training schedules, social contracts. So did you ever choose? Not from nowhere. You inhabited a system whose priors and thresholds were moving targets, many under your reach. That reach is the workable sense of freedom. Reasons that reliably couple to actions, within rules that keep coercion low and feedback honest. You won't step outside the loop. You can bend it. Hold one more thread. Meaning stayed when magic left. Projects that compound, people who reduce uncertainty, rituals that make starts cheap. Those loops survive bad days. You don't author ex nihilo. You apprentice yourself to causes worth serving, and over time the system calls that feeling purpose. One last micro story. A friend texts at midnight with news you didn't want. Urges flare, rage, reply, retreat. You breathe, name, sleep. In the morning you call, listen, plan. No angels moved. Parameters did. The future, slightly better, begins. You're not outside the code. You're the craft inside it, training causes to make better futures. If you want the renderer idea grounded in real experiments, watch the next episode on how observations load reality. Subscribe for more hard evidence stories and comment with one lever you'll move this week, then report back with the result.